1 out of 5 people in Canada was born outside the country. That's nearly 7 million immigrants. While most came for reasons of family and employment, some were forced to leave their homes, and many can never return. These are Canada's refugees. Today on Catholic Focus, we go to the National Catholic Conference on Resettlement. You'll learn about parishes making heroic efforts to welcome refugees. But first, let's meet some courageous newcomers to Canada. It's December 2012, and experts in the fields of immigration and refugees have assembled in Toronto. They've come for the second National Catholic Conference on Resettlement. That such a conference exists speaks volumes about the Church in Canada and the growing role of parishes as sponsors of refugees. The conference is taking place down the road from Pearson International Airport. And on the second day of the conference, a new family of refugees, the Miras, are scheduled to arrive. The Miras are a Catholic family from Iraq. Life was relatively safe in Iraq until 2003. Then Saddam Hussein was deposed and the country became unstable. Christians were targeted.
أنا ثيو المناثي أنا ثيو المناثي عمري لو شو تنحجاب ولا منخرخ لوخن فهذه أنا خيمة محملة أنا وكيل الشركة مشروبات غازية فخيمة محملة زيلة الشركة نوا شو نظام طايق مخبري لي ببيثها يمت فادي أمرا فادي كم شقلي أو محلوي تيو قمطر.
The family ransomed Fadi and he was safely returned. But the Miras knew they couldn't stay.
In 2006, we leave Iraq to Syria because Syria was a safe country.
والله سوريا أول 5 سنوات ما شاء الله بخير واوا وبعد 5 سنوات من وراء الأحداث من أني أحداث دبريلي فشلة بعد بتشبل العراق.
It was not safe and the bombs was all the places. And we ever go back. Never leave our house because we are so scary.
Good news came from Canada. The Miras were sponsored by St. Anthony of Padua Parish through Canada's Refugee Sponsorship Program. Their flight to Toronto was booked for December 4th. But on the eve of their departure, they received crushing news.
أخني على أساس ذات أخوة 3/12 تفارقها من سوريا وكمياويلا موعد الطيارة وكم حديلا يومها فمخمد ذات بيومها السفر ديان كم خبريلا ميرا مثو فيزا ديوخن كد ميرا مثو فيزا ديوخن أي بيثا مديون كلهم مشينا بخايا ميرا دكا يعني خاطا يخالف كم شغليلو ضد.
The family waited through 4 more months of delays, but finally the day arrived.
ما شاء الله من مطيرا المطار كندا وخلص له شغلات ديا واستقبال لك مطيرا برا الاستقبال ديا اللي هو ابونا وجماعه ديته كله واخونا باسل وبسخلن كبيره ولافدات ديا وما شاء الله استقبال كلش حلو يعني.
It was a great welcome for us and me and family. So I never forget that day. It was a great day.
Dr. Martin Mark, you're the director of the Office of Refugees for the Archdiocese of Toronto, and I understand that you're also a refugee yourself.
That's right. I came from Hungary, and I established several years ago.
Dr. Mark, your office invited parishes throughout the Archdiocese of Toronto to sponsor refugees from abroad. Tell us about the response to that plea.
In the last 4 years, since Cardinal Collins spoke up about it, that we need to help refugees who are not only in this country, but maybe on the other side of the world, there is an unbelievable response from our parishes and parishioners. And while 10 years ago we had about 3 parishes involved in refugee sponsorship, now in the Archdiocese of Toronto, from the 225 parishes, 166 are sponsoring refugees.
Now, just how difficult is it for a refugee family to come over, or even an individual refugee claimant, once they've been identified?
It is a very complicated process, but the number one issue is that we need a sponsor. Mm-hmm. So once there is a welcoming community and they are prepared, they have to do fundraising, they have to undergo training, they have to do preparations, and then immigration kind of process the case, and the refugee comes as landed immigrants, and then the work starts.
Mm-hmm. So tell me, what are some of the reasons for resettlement, looking at the cases of refugees who have come here in Toronto?
Usually we have a lot of refugees who have to flee, not because they had political ambitions or any involvement or any interest, but they are innocent victims of war, or they are targeted by extremists just because of their faith, just because of their life, just because they exist somewhere. Mm-hmm. These people have to flee and go to other countries where there is an emergency situation and they cannot get durable solutions, so we need to help them or they have no peace.
Here at the conference, we've been hearing a lot about changes to Canadian immigration laws, laws pertaining to refugees. How do these laws affect refugees who are coming over here?
In the refugee resettlement, or with other words, refugee sponsorship area, we have a great increase. So in the last few years, the government doubled the number of refugees who could come. However, this year, unfortunately, we had changes in the rules, and that basically eliminated the medical support, the health insurance called IFH, Interim Federal Health Insurance Plan. And that is an extra responsibility now for our parishioners, where refugees who are coming from warlike situations or refugee camps, and they need a lot of medical help or mental support, then now all this cost has to be absorbed by our parishioners.
Now, you've overseen a lot of success stories here in the Archdiocese. What do you think are the key factors to a successful integration of a family?
I think it's very important to make sure that if we are involved in something, we have to do it on the best way. And therefore, we believe that successful sponsorship starts overseas. That means that we personally identify and select refugees with the help of local churches and communities. After the selection, once they are matched with our parishes, we insist on it that the community is in connection with the refugee while the refugee is overseas, managing expectations, learning each other, building friendship and helping them to survive with spiritual support. So once the refugee arrives to Canada, in the Toronto airport, land as a newcomer, already they know what they can expect, and the community, the parishioners, they know what they can expect. This is key.
Well, thank you very much, Dr. Martin Markin, for welcoming us here at the conference.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Thanks.
Canada's compassionate reputation doesn't come cheaply. It takes time and money to process refugee claimants. False claims burden the system and force legitimate refugees to wait longer. In 2012, the Canadian government made changes to cut costs and expedite claims. One of the most controversial changes was to the Interim Federal Health Program. That program provides health care coverage for refugee claimants while they wait to be processed. Cuts to the program mean that some claimants won't be covered, even for essential care. So who pays if the refugee can't and the government won't? I asked a representative of Citizenship and Immigration Canada. Deborah, from the perspective of Citizen and Immigration Canada, how does Canada see its global role in terms of providing a home for refugees?
I would start by saying that we see our role as a key one in the world. We are one of the largest, we offer one of the largest and most generous resettlement programs in the world. And we are certainly a key player in the world in terms of offering protection through asylum as well. Although we're not a country like Kenya or South Africa that's hosting tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of refugees. We do provide protection to the people who do arrive on our shores, either as asylum seekers or the people that we select from urban cities and refugee camps from around the world. We are one of the biggest, we're one of the big 3 refugee countries in the world. 94% of all refugees that are resettled in the world are resettled to only 4 countries, and the US, Australia, Canada, and Sweden. So we're very proud of that.
Now, because we have such great success in terms of resettling refugees, it means that there's a lot of demand, and there are a lot of people waiting to be able to come here. And we've heard at this conference parishes who say that they're waiting to be able to bring in their refugees, particularly from Syria, and some say they've been waiting for a long time. What is the Canadian government doing to make it more efficient and to make it quicker to be able to bring refugees here?
I would start by saying that the needs will always exceed capacity. There are well over 10 million refugees in the world that the UNHCR is aware of who are actually under the care and mandate of the UNHCR. They've already identified well over 800,000 that need further protection through resettlement. And although Canada is generous, I think it would be naive to pretend that we would be able to open our doors to that many people at one time. So what we've been trying to do, and what we've been actually consulting over the past 6 months with stakeholders, including our private sponsors, is how we can use our resources more effectively. We're starting to pilot test things like video conferencing in certain places. So we're trying different things right now to speed things up. We've also, and our private sponsors are not happy about this one, but we have placed a limit to the number of new applications that can be submitted, because we had become paralyzed by the sheer volume of applications. And when you know, some people will argue and say, well, at least you're giving them hope. I would argue back, it's a false hope if someone's going to wait for 5 years only to be found out later on that they actually weren't a refugee in the first place. They may have been a desperate person, but they weren't a refugee, and we lost the time in actually being able to take someone out who was a refugee.
Now, resettling refugees can be an expensive process, and there are some advocates for refugees who are concerned that some changes in the policy of providing health care for refugees will mean that there are some refugees who are coming who won't be able to access some essential care. Can you comment on these changes?
I'll first start by saying that for resettled refugees that are coming under the government-assisted refugees program, nothing has changed. So those resettled refugees that we choose and select from overseas are still entitled to all of the health benefits that they had before the changes for other. It's asylum seekers that are mostly impacted, and some of our privately sponsored refugees as well, but certainly asylum seekers will no longer have access to a package that we maintain was in often respects more generous than what some low-income Canadians were receiving.
But in terms of essential health care, like pregnant women, they would continue to receive the care that they need?
Persons in this country can go to a hospital and receive care. And I would actually throw it back on, this is a, you know, it is a faith-based television network, so I will throw it back to the faith-based communities to help step up to the plate if they feel that there's someone who's fallen through the cracks. There is support available through other avenues. It doesn't always have to be the federal government that provides that support.
And we're seeing that there is a lot of partnership between the Canadian government and other local partners. Can you tell us about these partnerships and these different programs, particularly also with the Catholic Church and local parishes?
I will speak. We are the only country in the world that has what is called a private sponsorship of refugees program. Some people in the Catholic Diocese here in Toronto refer to it as a civic program, but it is called the private sponsorship of refugees program. It's the largest in the world because it's the only one in the world, where we actually partner with persons, parishioners, churches. It's mostly a faith-based movement. There are other ethnic organizations that contribute as well and engage, but it started off as a faith-based movement by and large, and continues to be driven by faith-based movements who turn around and name people that they would like to sponsor. And it's not just that they're naming them, they're actually providing the support for them when they come to Canada for the very first year. They're providing the housing, the income support, financial support, social support, settlement supports. A lot of the people they're sponsoring are people that they know through parishioners. It's family links, family relationships that are being brought back together, but not always. Certainly the churches here are speaking this week about how they can collectively work together to help other persons that they may not necessarily know as well. It's a program we're very proud of. Over 200,000 people have been resettled to Canada since 1979 under this program, 47,000 since 2001 alone.
Well, it's a legacy for us as Canadians to be proud of. And thanks very much for sharing with us today, Deborah.
All right, pleasure.
Every refugee has experienced danger and displacement. For Reverend Majed El-Shafi, his ordeal as a refugee ended safely in Canada. He's now a human rights advocate based in Toronto, but he knows he can never visit his homeland again. His story begins in Egypt. Reverend Majed El-Shafi, every story of a refugee is harrowing, but yours is particularly extraordinary. And several years before you came here, it would have been maybe unimaginable that you would even be called Reverend. Tell me about, first of all, going back, becoming a Christian in Egypt.
I was born from a wonderful Muslim family back home in Egypt. Most of my family worked in the legal career. What I mean worked in the legal career, my father was a lawyer, my brother was a lawyer, my uncle was judge in the Egyptian Supreme Court. When you're born from a family like this, you found a huge big library in your bedroom full of books about human rights, freedom of religion, justice. I believed in every and each one of these books. After I finished my high school, I went to join the law school in Alexandria to become a human rights lawyer. The first year, the discrimination and the persecution that happening to the Christians in Egypt shocked me to the core. As we're talking right now in a country like Egypt, for example, you cannot build churches. By the law, you can build bar, discotheque, but not churches. There is many of the Christians activists in prison, estimated to from 6 to 8,000 Christians activists in the Egyptian prison. All of this persecution make me wonder why. Why there is persecution happening to the Christian community. In my opinion, you do not persecute somebody unless you're scared from the truth that they carry. So I went to my best friend Tamer. Tamer was a Christian, I was a Muslim. And I went to him and I told him, Tamer, why there is persecution happening to your community? And Tamer gave me a Bible. I started to read this Bible. First time I read the Bible was John 8. And in John 8, they brought a lady commit adultery, throw her in front of the Lord. Told him, if you are really son of God, judge her according to the law of Moses. And the Lord looked at all of them, told them, who without sin cast her the first stone. Now, if you think about it for a minute, the only one who can really cast the first stone is Christ himself, because he's the only one who have no sin, but he didn't. He looked back at the lady and he said, go sin no more, I forgive you. That's really touched my heart. I started to read the Bible. I started to understand what is Christianity. I converted from Islam to Christianity. I started a human rights organization, underground human rights organization, back home in Egypt to bring equal rights to the Muslims and the Christians back home.
Starting that human rights organization, that eventually you found yourself in prison.
I was arrested in August 15, 1998. I was tortured. I was put in an Abu Zabal prison for 7 days. I was, they shaved the hair of my head. They put my head in cold and hot water. They hang me upside down. They burned me with cigarettes. They crucified me for 2.5 days. They put salt and lemon on my open wounds. After that, I was put in house arrest and I received the death penalty. And then that's when I escaped from Egypt to Israel.
And once you were in Israel, I understand that once again, you found yourself in prison.
There is a peace agreement, Camp David, between the Egyptians and the Israelis. And according to the peace agreement, they cannot accept any country, both countries cannot accept any refugees from both sides. So I spent in the Israeli prison 1 year, 3 months, 15 days, 12 hours, 24 minutes. You count the minutes when you are innocent. Through Amnesty International and UNHCR, I was able to get out of the prison, and I'm a free man now in Canada.
Now tell me about that process of adjusting, trying to rebuild your life after having experienced so much trauma back in Egypt.
It was a very long process of healing, but it wasn't between day and night. So I came out of prison tortured. There's scars still on my body that I consider it a medal of honor, really. My family disowned me. I came here to Canada with $100 in my pocket and just the clothing on my back, basically.
And completely alone.
And completely alone. And that's when we have friends that I start to develop my relationships in the society. And 2 years later, I started One Free World International as a human rights organization, basically to help the persecuted Christians and other minorities around the world, people they used to be in the same position like myself.
Now, how common is your story? It seems very extraordinary to me. I don't hear about many of these stories in the news. Is this happening very often?
There is one persecuted Christian every 3 minutes worldwide. Last year, over 165,000 Christians was killed for their faith. Between 200 to 300 million persecuted Christians in our world. Mm-hmm. Sad truth and sad reality. My story is actually one of the happy ending story. Mm-hmm. Many of these Christians, many of these victims is actually killed, or they was unable to become free again or to rebuild their lives again. But the persecution that's happening to the Christians today is the worst persecution happened to any religious minority around the world from the beginning of the history.
Now, Reverend El-Shafi, thankfully your story ended up being one of the happy endings. You were able to come to Canada and you were able to start up your ministry here. Can you share some final thoughts that you might have with our viewers from your own experience?
My last statement or my last message to the people who's listening to us right now: the persecuted Christians is dying, but they're still smiling. Mm-hmm. They are in very deep, dark night, but they still have the candle of hope. After every night, there is new morning carrying new day. After every storm, there is sunshine. After every persecution, there is victory in Jesus' name. Mm-hmm. Believe me when I tell you, they can kill the dreamer, but no one can kill the dream.
Well, thank you for sharing your hope with us.
Thank you for having me.
In every Canadian city, there are refugees starting their lives anew with the help of their neighbors. To learn about the Refugee Sponsorship Program, visit the website of Citizenship and Immigration Canada. And if you're in the Archdiocese of Toronto, visit the comprehensive website for the Office for Refugees. For Catholic Focus, I'm Kris Dmytrenko. Thanks for watching.